Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's review we're going to be taking a look at the newly released Transformers Earthrise Voyager class Megatron. First of all, taking a look here at the packaging, you can see that as per tradition with all of the Earthrise figures, we do have a fantastic piece of artwork there of the character in this instance. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear as if though this is Megatron based on his Earth mode appearance. However, it appears as if though it's actually Megatron based on his Siege appearance. But you can see a really nice piece of artwork there, Megatron looking very angry whilst looking at a holographic image there of the Ark. As we turn around here to the back of the packaging, we've got product shots of both Megatron in his robot mode as well as there in his tank mode. And then finally, for the other side of the packaging, we just have that standard Earthrise artwork. So in all, really nice packaging design, and I definitely love the artwork that we have here of the character, despite it being inaccurate to the actual figure that we do get. Now, Earthrise Megatron here, for those of you who don't know, is indeed a heavy retool of that of the Transformers Siege one. And this was actually a figure that I wasn't really all that looking forward to, as personally for me, I'm more than happy with my original Siege release. And to be honest with you, I don't think that the design difference between this version to the actual Siege version is all that different. In my opinion, I do just believe this to be a cash grab on Hasbro's part, just so that they can get another Megatron figure into the line, as of course Megatron is one of the most popular characters, so therefore sells the best. However, I'll get the packaging out of the way and then we'll take a closer look at Megatron himself. And so now, turning here to the main event himself, here we have the Earthrise Megatron, and for the most part, actually looking really nice. The only downside to this figure is that when compared to the Siege release, this definitely does feel as if though it is rather lazy. With the Earthrise Optimus Prime, we basically got a completely brand new figure, which shared very minute similarities when it came to the transformation. This figure here, however, though, is basically just the Siege Megatron skeleton, with a very minimal amount of pieces that have been resculpted in order to give him a more Earth mode, tank mode. However, we'll get more into that once we get him transformed. But taking a look at him here in the robot mode, you can see that for the most part he looks really awesome, definitely very faithful to his Generation 1 appearance. Once again, he does transform into a tank as opposed to an actual gun. However, I think that that's just something that we're going to have to accept with these mainline Megatron figures. As we turn him around here to the back, he does have a rather large backpack. However, I presume this is going to be accurate to the actual Earthrise model, and you can see here that it's very reminiscent to how the Siege tank treads did just hang off the back as well. As we turn him around, you are able to see that we do once again have that Siege battle damage. It is unfortunate that it has came and plagued the Earthrise Megatron. Personally, I do wish that this was all clean, much like we have seen with some of the most recent Earthrise releases. However, I don't think that it looks too bad. But taking a look, you can see that this entire section here is just the tank turret. And if I just remove this, this is one of my major gripes with this figure, is the fact that he is an incredibly heavy parts former. Now, if we just remove this section here, this is actually two pieces of the tank mode, which combine in order to make this almost shield-like blade. Personally, I don't think that it works all that well. You can see that this section very loosely does just fit over the top. This does become a rear section of the tank mode, which I'll showcase later on in the review. The detailing there for the blade though, however, does look really, really nice, and you can see that the actual turret itself is a lot more streamlined when compared to that of the version that we did actually get with the Siege release. But nonetheless, I do wish they could have perhaps had found a way to have not made this parts form and actually had incorporated it into the actual robot mode. We can, however, actually take the peg here and plug this into the back. Now, it sort of creates his G1 look with the barrel hanging over the shoulder. However, it's so big that it does look rather goofy. I would have loved to have seen them perhaps engineered this figure in a way so that this could have accurately stayed here on the back of Megatron, much like it did in the original G1 series. But nonetheless, it is an option that you can do. However, in my opinion, not one that works all that well. As this is on a hinge joint, you can bring this over the shoulder. However, you can see how ridiculously large that is, and it doesn't go all the way over either, which is unfortunate. So for robot mode, I do tend to just completely disregard this. However, something which I have found that you can do with this is actually combine this with some of the components to the Deluxe Class Fast Track. And just to very quickly show you that, you can just take this section here, peg this into the top, and then take these sections and just slide those there, and you have an incredibly long staff. Now you see here that the actual port that we have here for the main barrel of Megatron's tank mode is very loose. It definitely doesn't have the best grip when holding 5mm ports. You can see just how incredibly loose it does fall out. So if this is an option that you are looking to go with in terms of a display, I don't think that it's one that's going to work all that well. However, I just very quickly wanted to demonstrate that if you are so inclined, you can definitely utilize this component and attach it there to Fast Track. Setting the accessories off to the side though and bringing Megatron in here for a closer look, you can see that this time around we have got a completely brand new head sculpt, which in my opinion is inferior when compared to that of the original Siege release. And whilst on the topic of the Siege version, this is where we can now bring him in for some comparisons. You can see that I definitely believe that the helmet design is a lot more interesting in terms of a visual appeal than compared to the version that we get here with the Earthrise. I do think that this one here better matches his appearance from perhaps the Cyberverse show as opposed to the version that we seem to be getting for the War for Cybertron Megatron, it is rather odd to see how drastically different they are in terms of their design. I'm not entirely sure on how Megatron is going to reformat when he goes into Earth, but I'm pretty sure that the head design wouldn't change this much. You can see that it's much more simplistic, a lot more smoother in its design than compared to this one, which in my opinion has a lot more detail. I also do actually prefer the actual faceplate that we got here with the Siege version than compared here to the Earthrise. The only area of which I think that is better on the Earthrise release is the fact that this time around they have actually painted his brow here, so you can see some nice paint applications there, and I think that it just adds a little bit more character to him than compared to this one, which was just a complete silver paint application. However, when comparing the actual molds themselves, in my opinion, the Siege version wins hands down. If we just compare the torsos as well, you can see that once again they are very similar in terms of their designs. However, they have actually completely remolded this entire region. Personally, for me, I do prefer the look once again here for the Siege version. I do think that this one looks a lot more slimmer in comparison, and definitely nowhere near as bulky and intimidating as this release. You can see that the forearms as well as the shoulders are exactly the same. The hands, for the most part, appear to be a completely brand new sculpt here for the Earthrise version, and I'll cover that more once we get him transformed into tank mode. But if you take a look here from the side perspective, what they seem to have done is actually completely remolded this section here, which pegs on to the shoulder. So you can see that we no longer have this piece here which hinges up and down. That has been completely abolished here for the Earthrise release. But other than that, the forearms as well as this section of the shoulder are just a complete reuse. As we turn down here to the lower torso, this whole section here is a completely brand new sculpt. You can see when compared here to the Siege release, once again it's a lot more simpler in terms of its design and has nowhere near as much sculpted in detailing as we did get with this. The thighs are exactly the same, so that is also unfortunate to see. However, the shins are a completely brand new sculpt, and that is obviously to accommodate his Earth mode look, but the feet and the ankle spurs are once again just a direct reuse. So therefore, to conclude this comparison, in all, I'd say that this figure is perhaps 50-50 in terms of how many components that he does share. You can see that the tank treads are completely different as well as this area, so it really is just the skeleton that he does share with the thighs, and obviously here with the forearms. As we take a look here at the fusion cannons, these two are a completely different sculpt, and in my opinion this is actually where I do prefer the look of the Earthrise version. It's a lot more slimmer in comparison and is actually a little bit longer, and I do prefer the detailing here at the top. It better matches his original G1 appearance. But just comparing them here in terms of moulding, I do definitely think that this is going to be up to your own personal preference in which version you do indeed prefer. Whilst on the topic of comparison, something which they have actually fixed on the Earthrise version when compared to the Siege version is the neck joint. The neck joint on this release is a lot more stiffer than compared to the very loose neck joint that we got here for the Siege release. You can see that you could essentially pull the head completely up and reveal a really awful cavity. However, this time around with Earthrise, they have actually sculpted in some notches here in order to prevent you from actually lifting this all the way up. There is a slight gap, however, if you just push this down, that can easily be concealed, and due to the actual stiffness here of the joint, when moving the head around, I have no issues with the neck actually becoming sunken into the joint. So that is a really nice fix, and is something that perhaps I wish that they would have fixed here for the re-release here of the Netflix repainted Siege version. But very quickly covering the articulation, the head articulation on the Earthrise version in my opinion is actually superior than compared to the Siege release. We do get a great range of motion looking upwards as well as down. He can also rotate side to side, and due to this being on a ball joint, it can also rock side to side as well. We do get a full 360-degree rotation there at the arm. The arms can also hinge out to the sides, which is an almost 90-degree bend, which is fantastic. Full 360-degree rotation at the bicep, as well as a 90-degree bend there at the elbow. Unfortunately, we still do have that locking mechanism for the elbow, so if you wish for him to have straightened arms, they really do have to be completely straight, so there is no intermediate joint. In order for you to actually get them at a slightly more natural stance, you do have to click this into place. This is something that I wish that they would have abolished here for the Earthrise version, however they haven't appeared to have done that. We have no wrist rotation, however they can hinge forwards and backwards due to transformation. We of course do get a waist rotation joint, however it is slightly restricted due to this whole back section. The legs here can kick forwards that far, which is great, as well as back to about that far. He can also do the split full 360 rotation there at the thigh, 90-degree bend there at the knee, and then finally we do get an ankle rocker joint side to side. However, something worth noting is that this doesn't actually clip into place for transformation, unlike the original Siege release. So in terms of articulation, it's almost identical to that of the original Siege version. However, in my opinion, with the fixes made to the actual neck joint, it's a lot more pleasurable to actually articulate this figure around, and of course he does have a greater range of motion there at the head. And here for a quick Earthrise size comparison, we have Megatron compared to that of the Earthrise Optimus Prime, and in my personal opinion, I do think that Optimus Prime here actually warranted getting an Earth mode release, as opposed to here with Megatron. I do think that his design is very similar to that of the Siege release, and as stated earlier on in my review, I only really do believe that they actually made this figure so that they could actually sell more Megatron figures within this wave. I really don't think that this was a necessary release, and could have given us perhaps a different Voyager class if they had opted to just stick with the original Siege version. But you can just see see in terms of a comparison that I think that they look really nice. You can see that in terms of scale, Optimus Prime does appear to actually be slightly taller here than Megatron, which is quite unusual, as I don't believe that is the case with the original Siege release. But in terms of an actual display, I do think that they look quite nice. However, in my own personal opinion, I have no idea as to why Megatron would actually obtain an Earth mode look. I think that he's too proud of a leader to actually degrade himself to do so, so I really do wish they would have just stuck with the Siege version as opposed to giving him an Earth mode look, as in my opinion, the Earth mode look is definitely the inferior look between him and his Cybertronian version. And so now, turning here to the transformation from robot mode to tank mode, surprisingly, despite it being incredibly similar to that of the Siege version, it is actually a lot more simplistic and in my opinion a lot more enjoyable, as there are actually less components to actually move around and manipulate amongst other pieces. But to begin with, what you're going to want to do here is just straighten out the arms until they click into place. We can then take the fists here, and surprisingly these do actually lock into place this time around, at least this side. For some reason, unfortunately, this side here doesn't seem to tab in all that well. And just for a very quick integration of another accessory, here we have the mace. Now, if you recall, when I actually did my Centurion drone review, I did state that the peg was too big to actually fit into the Siege version. However, here for Earthrise, it slides in there no problem whatsoever, so I do definitely believe that this was designed to fit into the Earthrise release. I'm quite surprised to see there is actually a difference between the pegs, as they are all supposed to have these 5mm pegs, but nevertheless you can see here that he holds it with no issue whatsoever, and seeing as this hand actually clicks into place now, there is no floppy nature when he actually wields this whatsoever. So definitely super cool looking weapon and looks great when added onto the figure, and it's very easily removable. But you're just going to want to fold the wrists in and of course collapse the elbows and repeat the same process here on this side. You're then going to want to take the fusion cannon, rotate this here up to the top, and then we're going to turn our attention here to the back and just begin to untab the arms here. Take this whole section and just shift this all the way up, very similar to that of the actual Siege release. You're just going to want to unpeg all this, and you can see how that will lift over the top. Once that is lifted over, we can then begin to combine the arms. So just fold those in, take the fusion cannon here, and you can see a peg that of course will slide into this post. So just snap that in there nice and securely. What you'll now want to do is turn your attention here to this side, fold these sections out, and then bring this piece here forwards. Now I wouldn't recommend tabbing this in here just yet, as you're going to want to slide all of this here over the top of this section. So you can see that you're going to want to get these here slid down, and you can see that we do indeed have tabs that are actually going to peg into these slots. So you're going to want to make sure that they're all the way down, and repeat the same process here for this side, and that is now where you can bring in this piece, and we can see two tabs on either side that are going to peg into these slots. So just snap that in and then snap this section into place as well, and you can see that once again the head does slightly sink into the torso, similarly to that of the original version. Now what I recommend doing is coming here to the legs and just folding up the heel spurs. Turning our attention here now to the front, you're going to want to rotate the waist around so that the front is now facing the back. We can then split Megatron's legs out to the sides and then hinge them here, and take this section here and move this out the way so that we can get a greater bend. Repeat the same process, so hinge this section out to the side, just collapse this in, and similarly to the Siege version, you're just going to want to according and collapse this hinge joint in until this tab and this slot will align up with this tab and this slot in there. So just align those up appropriately and snap those into place, and of course repeat the same process here for the opposite side. So just rotate all of this in. Now I wouldn't recommend actually tabbing this in here just yet, as you're going to want to come here to the blade section, remove this piece, as this does actually fill out the rear section of the vehicle mode. So what you're supposed to do here is, you can see two tabs on either side. These are supposed to peg into slots here and here. So you're going to want to shoot that in there. It's very difficult to do, and then actually shoot it into the opposite side and then compress those legs, and you can see how that does fill out the back area just slightly. It doesn't fill it out all the way. It would have been nice if it could have covered this whole region. However, nonetheless, it's better than having just an empty space there. Once that's done, of course, we can turn our attention here to the side, snap that into place, take these sections here and just snap these also into place, and then turning our attention here finally to the turret, we're going to want to collapse this post up, and very similarly to the Siege version, this will just cap over the top, slide into place, and there we have Earthrise Megatron fully transformed up into his tank mode. And so now taking a look here at Megatron in his tank mode, this is where the majority of my issues do lay with this release, as I honestly don't believe this to be a very accurate representation of an Earth mode tank. I do think that the treads are quite nice, however this whole upper section here, in my opinion, still does appear very alien in design, and as stated before, I really cannot imagine Megatron actually scanning an Earth mode vehicle. He's way too proud for that. He would definitely stand above the humans and would look to completely juxtapose what the Autobots do, so I do think that he would still go with a more Cybertronian vehicle mode than as opposed to this. However, if we take a look here at the front section, I do actually think this looks quite cool. You can see that we do have some nice detailings there, and I do like how this whole piece here does smooth out the front section of the tank. We do have some nice detailing here for the main barrel. We can see here the weathering effect is very predominant, and that is mainly why we saw it in robot mode. Personally, I don't think this works whatsoever. It really does look as if though someone has just splattered silver paint all the way throughout this figure. It's not even mud, it's this almost battle damaged look, which once again I really don't think looks that cool. We do have a D16 decal here, which I think is a really nice throwback to the Destron 16 that we did get with the original Japanese release of Megatron, so that's super cool continuity. We do have a Decepticon insignia, and as we turn here to the back, we do just have the feet which swing out. It would have been nice once again if they could have engineered this in a way so that these could have actually folded in and filled out this whole cavity. I definitely think that there's more than enough room for them to have actually done that. He does roll really nicely as well. You can see that we do have 4 caster wheels here on the base, and the turret here does rotate the full 360. However, we unfortunately cannot get the main turret to actually hinge up and down, which in my opinion is definitely a missed opportunity. For a comparison, bringing in the Siege version here, I have the animation version than as opposed to the Netflix one, which I was doing robot mode comparisons with, but you can see that I do think that they are very similar. You can definitely see the similarities in terms of the way that they transform. I do think that this figure here is once again very lazy, and in my opinion I do think still looks very Cybertronian in terms of a tank mode. It definitely doesn't look as good in my opinion as it could have if they would have given him a completely brand new mold, and just turning him under to the underside, you can see that the skeleton is literally exactly the same. There is no differences into the transformation, other than the fact that there are some components which are missed out on this version, making the transformation slightly more simplistic. Something which I would have liked to have seen them done is actually carry over this flap here, which comes over the top and actually conceals some of the lower section. They've opted to skip that here for this version, which if you look at this from a head-on perspective, you can definitely see Megatron's head poking out from there, which once again it definitely does not aid his Earth mode look whatsoever. So in terms of tank mode, it is by far the weaker mode out of the two, and in my opinion further solidates my opinion in saying that I wish that they would have just stuck with the Siege version than giving him an Earthrise release at all. So some final thoughts here for the Earthrise Megatron. I believe this to be one of the most underwhelming Earthrise figures that we have gotten so far, and for the most part I have been very quick to praise the Earthrise line in saying that I believe them to be some of the best figures that Hasbro have put out for many years, but Megatron here is definitely the exception. I do think that he's a rather pointless release. To go back to my earlier statement, I definitely do believe that he was just released in order for Hasbro to get a cash grab, as of course Megatron is one of the most popular characters, so I definitely believe that they thought that if they were to release him, all the kids and the collectors would of course want to buy him as he's the most updated version. But personally, if you have the Siege release, you really don't have a need to pick this one up, especially if you can get the Netflix repaint. I do believe that figure to be the best version of Megatron, and this one here is definitely not the best figure. I do think that the robot mode looks decent, however the head sculpt is far too simplistic for me. It doesn't match the artwork that we do get here on the packaging, and it is definitely a stark difference when comparing the head sculpt to this version than to the Siege version. With Optimus Prime there was some continuity with the head sculpts, they were basically identical. This version here looks more like it's just jumped straight out of the Cyberverse Adventure series than as opposed to the aesthetic that we appear to be getting with the Earthrise and Siege releases, which is a more stylistic, more realistic take on some of our favourite characters. The transformation I do believe to be quite enjoyable, however that is just merely due to the fact that it is the Siege skeleton, and due to some of the remoulded elements it doesn't have as many components, making the transformation by far a lot more simplistic. But for tank mode I just think that it's absolutely atrocious. It definitely to me doesn't look like any Earth mode tank that I've ever seen. I think that the main turret here looks very futuristic in terms of its design. The best aspect of this is this entire tread region, however with the silver paint applications that they have applied onto this, I think that it looks awful. It definitely looks as if though someone's just flicked silver paint over Megatron, and to me definitely doesn't give the impression of battle damage. So in all, I can't really recommend this figure to you unless you are a die-hard completionist or just a really big fan of Megatron. If you have the Siege version, then this is definitely a pass. It's for sure not going to be the standout out of the entire Earthrise line, and in my opinion is one one of the lowest ranked figures that I have collected so far. I really do hope that you enjoyed my review. If you did, please do let me know down in the comments section below. Also, be sure to let me know whether or not you agree with my thoughts on this figure and whether or not you will indeed be adding him to the collection. I do apologise if this review did appear to show this figure in a slightly more negative light. However, I just have to keep it 100% honest on the channel and say that I really do not think this to be a superior release than compared to his predecessor. I thank you all for watching my review, and until my next video, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.